Once upon a time, there was a beautiful couple named Kingsley and Deborah. They loved themselves so dearly. Even when Deborah was heavily pregnant, Kingsley didn't stop giving her words of affirmation in her pregnancy journey. They had been married for 4 years and had a son together named Femi. It is true that no marriage is without disagreements and quarrels. But Kingsley and Deborah made it a habit that they would not go to bed without settling their differences. Kingsley loved Deborah and his son a lot. They had been living in peace and love until one day when things began to go astray. That cold early morning, just as Kingsley was about to go to work, he began to give his wife words of affirmation. "My lady, the love I have for you freshens every day like a daisy. Don't worry, we'll carry this pregnancy together just like we did before. You know you are my joy and my heartbeat. I promise to protect you and our son Femi." "I love you a lot, Kingsley," Deborah said, looking into her husband's eyes and blushing and smiling. She kept smiling as he drew her closer. "Honey, when you give birth, I promise to buy you a new car," Kingsley said to Deborah, who raised her 2 hands in happiness. She hugged Kingsley tightly. "You are the best husband in the whole world, my king," Debbie said. Few minutes later, Kingsley left. It was noon already. The atmosphere was calm. It was Saturday and the market was somehow dull. Kingsley was going through his sales book when a call came in that made his life miserable. He picked the call. "Hello? Hello, sir. Good afternoon." "Yes, good afternoon." "We are sorry, sir, but the ship carrying your containers just sank in the middle of the sea with the others. We are deeply sorry." Kingsley was a successful businessman. He was blessed in his business. He was advised by a friend of his to take some loan from the bank and boost his business to greater heights. When Kingsley told his wife about his friend's advice, she told him not to take the loan. Taking loans from banks, especially an amount bigger than your capital, can kill your business faster, Debbie told Kingsley. Kingsley had received a genuine contact from overseas. They wanted to clear their stock and needed someone who can buy all of it at a very cheap price. That was a mouth-watering offer. Kingsley thought about it for a while and went home to tell his wife about the business. Debbie advised him not to be greedy and let the business go. Good things never finish. But Kingsley couldn't sleep. His mind kept running races. If he buys those goods, he will never be poor again, he thought to himself. He then remembered his friend's advice to take a loan from the bank. He made up his mind that night to take the loan. Kingsley didn't want to tell his wife about taking the loan from the bank. He was sure she would disagree with him. He wanted to surprise her and prove her wrong. So he went ahead and used his shop and house as a collateral and collected huge sums of money from the bank. With part of the money he had taken from the bank, he rented a big storehouse that can accommodate the 2 containers of goods he was expecting. The phone Kingsley was holding fell from his hand. What have I gotten myself into? My house, my shop. Hey God. He quickly entered his car and drove to his house. Debbie, I'm finished, oh, Kingsley said, as he walked into his living room and sat on the cushion, carrying his hand on his head and shouting and sweating. Deborah rushed out confused as she tried to find out from her husband what happened. I took the loan from the bank. I used our house and the shop as collateral to get the business I told you about. Now the containers have fallen into the sea. But I told you to leave that business now, and you refused. Now see what you've done to us, Deborah said, holding Kingsley and trying to console him as tears ran down her own cheeks. All through the night, Kingsley couldn't sleep. He was waiting for the day to break so he can go and look for help. Although it felt as if the day won't break, but it did. Kingsley drove out immediately and started going to visit his friends one after the other. They all had stories to tell him and reasons why they can't be of help. He was heartbroken from the answers he got from his friends, those he ate and drank with, including those he had helped. Kingsley thought about Chief Agazie. Chief Agazie was one of the richest men in the market. People rumored him to be a ritualist, but for the moment, Kingsley needed help than what people thought. He decided to go and meet Chief Agazie in his house. In the evening, Kingsley went to see Chief Agazie in his mansion. He waited till Chief Agazie came into his majestic living room. He asked Kingsley what brought him to his house. Kingsley narrated his story to Chief Agazie. He told Kingsley that the only way he would help him was if he joined his secret cult. Kingsley refused, saying he wasn't going to soil his hands. He left the house of Chief Agazie and went back home. Weeks turned into months, and things went very bad for Kingsley, that he had to sell his car to clear some debts. It was due time to pay the loan which he had taken from the bank. The bank authorities came and locked up Kingsley's shop without listening to his pleas. Kingsley was filled with shame, but he was given the grace of 2 days before they would come back and lock up his house. Kingsley went back again to all his friends one after the other, begging them all to help him out. They all maintained the fact that they had no money to spare. Just a day before he would be locked out of his own house, Kingsley couldn't find sleep. He thought for a while. He decided to go ahead and meet Chief Agazie. He wouldn't let his pregnant wife and child suffer. Kingsley came to Chief Agazie's house and told him he was ready to take his help and take on the offer he was giving him as well. He told Chief that he cannot lose his house and he needed his help urgently. Chief smiled and told Kingsley to wait for him. He came out with a big mirror and a stick tied with a red cloth. He told Kingsley to take the stick and smite the mirror 3 times and then take a drink from the cup he also placed on the table. Kingsley did it, and surprisingly, the mirror didn't break. He also drank from the cup Chief had instructed him to drink from. Chief Agazie smiled and then brought out a bag of money. "Is that all?" Kingsley asked, smiling sheepishly. The chief nodded his head. Kingsley thanked him and carried the bag of money and started heading towards his house. Kingsley's phone kept ringing, but he didn't want to pick. He was on top of a bike heading to his house and he was filled with happiness. Chief Agazie wasn't a ritualist as he had thought. He dropped from the bike and entered into his gate with joy. He met his pregnant wife, crying, and carrying their only son, who looked lifeless. Kingsley immediately dropped the bag of money that was in his hands and rushed towards his wife. He took Femi from her hands. He checked Femi's heartbeat and it wasn't responding. His air had ceased and Femi was really dead, as he had thought. He opened his eyes in astonishment. "What happened?" he asked Debbie, shaking his son to see if he would wake up. "I was with him and he started shouting and holding his head till he fell down. I carried my baby only to find out he was dead. Just like that, my Femi died. I've been calling you but you didn't pick up. What have I done to deserve this?" Debbie asked, crying. "Why? Why me? Why us?" Debbie kept questioning nobody in particular as she sat on the floor crying. A stinging realization came to Kingsley. He remembered what he had done in Chief Agazie's house. Does it mean he just killed his only son for money? Chief never told him it would cost him his son. What was the need of the money without his Femi? That was not what he bargained for. Kingsley carried Femi and placed him in the hands of Debbie, who was sitting on the floor crying. He quickly picked the bag of money and rushed back to Chief Agazie's house. He got to the chief's house vibrating. "I don't want your money again. Take your money and give me back my son. I want my son Femi back. Please, just take your money back and give me my son," Kingsley kept saying as tears clouded his eyes, waiting to rain showers. Chief Agazie smiled mischievously at Kingsley and said, "Nothing goes for nothing. When you drank from the cup, you took an oath of belonging. You killed your son yourself when you stroked the mirror with the red-clothed stick. There is no going back now." Kingsley got stunned by what he had. He never knew what he had just done. He wasn't interested in finding out the requirements. His need for money clouded his judgment. "You are lucky you still have a pregnant wife at home. She can still give birth again and again. Look around you. I have no wife or child. But I don't want your money," Kingsley shouted, interrupting Chief Agazie. "Keep your money and stay away from my life," Kingsley said, and tried walking out of Chief Agazie's house. What he had kept him frozen and fixed at a point. "If you don't take the money, your wife and your unborn child will follow suit. You have already committed yourself. You have to pick between your wife and the money. There is no backing out." Kingsley walked back into the living room slowly, and the already clouded tears ran down his cheeks. How did Chief Agazie even know his wife was pregnant? He was really deep into a mess. Now the life of his loving wife, Reby, was at stake. How can he bring himself to lose his wife too the same day? He never planned for any of this. All he wanted was for his wife and beloved son Femi to be happy and comfortable. Kingsley wouldn't doubt Chief. He had already seen his son dead. He reluctantly carried the bag of money he came with, in tears, and left Chief's house. He turned and could see Chief smiling at him. Kingsley came back with the money and met his wife still crying in front of his dead son. He knew it was not good for her in her condition. He consoled her, took her inside and left with the body of his dead son. Kingsley took the money and cleared his debts with the bank. He still had enough to invest in his business. Reby asked Kingsley where he had gotten money from. He told her that he was able to get some money from one of his friends who he had previously lost contact with. He miraculously called him on the phone and decided to help him after he explained everything to him. And his wife believed him. Within a few weeks, Kingsley, who just recovered his shop from the bank authorities, had a drastic change of levels in business. His business got doubled and people started saying he used his son for money rituals. The news got to the ears of his wife, who also suspected Kingsley because of his new lifestyle. Kingsley now excused himself to make some calls anytime he's with her. At night, he sneaks out and comes back after a few minutes. She told Kingsley about the rumors flying around town, and he told her it was a lie. He lied for her own safety. Reby decided to find out where her husband usually sneaked off to every night. Kingsley stood up from the bed as usual and checked if Reby was sleeping. She pretended she was deep in sleep. Kingsley tiptoed out as usual. Reby followed him quietly. He walked into a room. That particular room had been empty and open. But since after the death of Femi, Kingsley had always locked the room. Kingsley had shut the door behind him, and she could hear nothing. She went back to bed and observed where Kingsley hid the key he had opened the door with. The next day, after Kingsley left his house to his business place, Reby couldn't wait. She was curious to find out what actually was inside that room and why her husband would go in there at night. She removed the key slowly from the spot Kingsley had kept it and went towards the room. She wanted to open the door, but something kept holding her back. She was scared. She finally found the courage to open the door with her shaky hands. The room was dark with black curtains. There were some fresh fetish stuffs all over with a strong stench. Reby entered the room and walked towards a little coffin lying inside the room. And to her greatest surprise, it was her dead son, Femi. Kingsley got to a point on his way to business and he stopped. He felt something was going wrong. He called his wife a number of times, but she didn't pick up. He quickly turned his car around and drove back home. Fear gripped Debbie. She covered her mouth with her hands to keep herself from crying out as tears started flowing down her face. She couldn't believe her own eyes that her husband was responsible for the death of their only son. But why? Why would Kingsley take away her joy? Debbie tried taking backward steps and she slipped and fell with a thud on the floor. Her stomach began to hurt her. Her waist started aching her too. She lay there on the floor crying her eyes out. She was so heartbroken. And suddenly something occurred to Debbie. If Kingsley could kill their only son, he may end up killing her too. She couldn't trust him any longer. Debbie summoned her strength and stood up from the floor. She heard the sound of a car coming into the compound. That must be Kingsley, Debbie thought. She wiped her tears and came out of the room holding her waist. She locked it well and ran towards her room, even though her stomach kept hurting her. She quickly kept the key back where she had taken it from and she lay on the bed. Kingsley came inside and saw his wife lying on the bed and crying. He came closer to her and asked her why she was crying. Debbie told Kingsley that she had slipped and fallen inside their room and that her stomach was paining her. Kingsley took his time and tried to rub his wife's waist for her in a bid to ease the pain that she was feeling. Debbie couldn't control her tears. The more she looked at her husband, the more she kept crying and wondering how everything went wrong. Kingsley had always been a loving husband. What happened? Something was wrong somewhere. She needed to talk to him and know what happened. "Babe," Debbie called out with tears. "Yes, my dear," Kingsley answered, looking Debbie into her eyes. The reply of Kingsley with fear in his eyes gave out to Debbie that everything was not all right with her husband. She decided to say something else. "I'll be fine. You should get going," Debbie said as she removed the hands of Kingsley from her stomach. Kingsley felt something was wrong. He looked at Debbie and wiped her tears with his index finger. He tried to kiss her on the lips, but she removed her face. That was a confirmation that everything was not okay. He kissed her on the forehead and then stood up and heaved a sigh. "I'll see you when I come back and we'll discuss better," he said, and left the room faking a smile. Debbie was restless. Thoughts started flowing into her head like an overrunning sea. What was she going to do? Was she going to survive living under the same roof with her husband? If he could kill his only son, whom he cherished a lot, what about her? If she decided to run, where would she run to? She was heavily pregnant and would soon deliver. If she goes to her parents' house, Kingsley would still come for her. What will be her way forward? The more Debbie tried to answer the surging questions, the more the questions came in their numbers. She picked her phone to call her parents to inform them what she had just found out. But on a second thought, Kingsley may end up killing her parents. Confusion set in as Debbie ran out of options. Kingsley got to his business place and wasn't at ease. He hadn't seen such fear in the eyes of his wife before. Something was really not going well with his wife. But what could that be? It's been a while since they lost their son, Femi. But if Femi was the problem, why would Debbie remove her lips when he tried to kiss her? A call came into Kingsley's phone and it was Chief Agazie calling him. He picked the call and Chief Agazie demanded for his presence. Kingsley went to visit Chief Agazie in his house. When he entered and greeted him, Agazie did not reply, but he was quiet and stared at Kingsley with a frown on his face. "What is the matter, Chief? Did I do anything wrong?" Kingsley asked out of curiosity. I warned you. I drew your ears. I was crystal clear when I sternly cautioned you. Kingsley was still looking at Chief Agazie frightfully and curiously. You were told not to tell your wife about your source of money, or show her your secret altar, or else she would be killed with her unborn child. Kingsley was confused. He never told his wife anything. It had always hurt him whenever he told his wife lies, even though he had been lying to save her life. What are you talking about? Kingsley asked Chief as his body started shaking. I didn't show or tell her anything. You were careless then, and she went looking around inside your secret room. It now dawned on Kingsley what really happened when he had gone to see his wife. She knew everything, and that was why she didn't accept his case. You will have to kill her or lose everything, including your life, Chief added. Kingsley fell on the floor crying like a little baby. No, not his wife, not his gem. He can't bring himself to kill his wife. What exactly had he gotten himself into? In the space of few months, his happiness has gone sour. This was not what he bargained for. How did he get into this mess with no return? Kingsley crept on his knees with tears, moving in front of Chief and pleading with his hands together. Please, I'm begging you, spare my wife. Spare my wife, please. Kingsley kept begging. You have 24 hours to do so yourself, or you will pay with your life and hers also, the Chief said and walked out of Kingsley. Kingsley lay flat inside the house of Chief and cried his eyes out. All he could think of were the sweet memories he had been sharing with his wife and his dead son. He remembered how many times his wife had encouraged him with love till he started advancing in business. He remembered how his wife had always been a source of peace to him. All the sweet memories. He loved his wife so much. Even remembered how his wife warned him to leave the business he ventured into that got him into the mess in the first place. Oh, what have I done? Kingsley said to himself. He coiled up on the floor and cried like a baby. What have I done? Kingsley sat up and began to ponder. If he kills his wife, then what is the need of all the wealth? And if he doesn't kill his wife, she will still be killed by Chief and he too would lose his life. Kingsley stood up and tried to wipe his tears. He made up his mind that he was going to explain to his wife what had happened, so they both can look for a solution together. Kingsley left Chief's house in his car and drove to his house. When he got to his house, he entered the living room. He called out to his wife, but no one answered. He went into his room, but he didn't see his wife. He tried calling her number, but it was switched off. Kingsley's heart began to beat faster. The tears in his eyes dried up. He started going into every room in the house, one after the other, calling out to his wife. Yet there were no signs of her anywhere. It's barely 2 hours since he left her on the bed. Kingsley was confused. He couldn't call his in-laws either. He had 24 hours to kill his wife, or both of them would end up dead. He had come to seek out a solution with her, only for him to discover she was missing. She couldn't control his emotions. His wife was nowhere to be found. Neither was she picking up her calls. Kingsley ran back inside and went to his room. He took the keys to the secret room. He got to the secret room, but his hands kept shaking out of fear. He couldn't control the mixed feeling of fear and anger. He kicked the door open with his foot. He was losing it already. He scattered everything he had placed inside the room. When he got to the open coffin containing the body of his dead son, Rufemi, he felt weak. He knelt down and cried. After a few minutes, he stood up and carried the coffin and started walking into his compound. Where he was going, he didn't know. He was already losing his senses of reasoning. His phone started to ring. He wasn't interested to pick the call, yet the phone kept ringing. He remembered he was looking for his wife. My wife, Kingsley called out and picked up the call. Hello, Debbie, he said anxiously. Hello, Kingsley. This is Pastor Joel. Kingsley opened his eyes. He had forgotten about God ever since his business started blossoming. No wonder he had not called for help. But how did Pastor Joel know he was in crisis? His senses started coming back. Hello, are you still there? Yes, Pastor, I am. I'm here with your wife. Come as quickly as you can. Kingsley, on hearing his wife was with the pastor, smiled and a tear dropped from his cheeks. He hung up immediately, entered his car and drove up to the house of the pastor. When he arrived at the house of the pastor, he saw his wife there, crying. Debbie knew it was only God that can save her family. Going to her parents' place would only endanger her the more. So she had called Pastor Joel, and he told her that he was at home. That was why she came to his house and narrated the whole story to him. Kingsley quickly rushed and hugged her. He started apologizing to his wife. I didn't know, Debbie. I didn't know it would take the life of our Femi. Please forgive me. Kingsley begged continuously with tears. Pastor Joel held him by the shoulders and asked him to stand up. It was not time to cry and shed tears. If he was truly sorry for his sins and to repent, that God was willing to forgive him. Are you willing to let go of all that you've acquired from the devil? Pastor Joel asked Kingsley. Kingsley nodded his head and said, Yes, I am willing to give it all up. All I want is for my wife and my unborn child to be alive, Kingsley said, holding his wife tightly. Pastor Joel heard the family and started praying with them. After a few minutes of prayers, he anointed both of them. He asked the family to stay with him till the 24 hours time elapsed. It was 24 hours already, and the couples were still alive. Pastor Joel told them that they were free to go back to their house, that nothing was going to harm them. He anointed them once again and allowed them to go free. When Kingsley and his wife got to his gate, they saw a huge crowd of people. Debbie was confused why people would go to their compound in numbers. That was when Kingsley remembered what happened yesterday. He brought out the coffin of his dead son outside. When he received a call from the pastor, he left it outside. The prayers of the pastor must have destroyed the charms holding the body from decaying. Seems like the smell of the corpse attracted people who decided to know where the smell was coming from. Kingsley stopped the car. He wanted to run away. All his wife was saying were inaudible because he was lost in the war inside his conscience. He looked up, closed his eyes and shook his head. He kept driving forward. The angry mob descended on Kingsley and dragged him out of his car. They didn't harm Debbie because she was pregnant, and Kingsley kept shouting that he was guilty alone and they should leave his wife. Few minutes later, the police arrived at the scene and arrested both Kingsley and his wife. They were taken to the station. Investigations were carried out and Debbie was found to not be guilty and was allowed to go. The police also went to Chief's house and arrested him. But there was no evidence to prove Chief was guilty of the allegation leveled against him and he was left to go free. Kingsley was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. Few days later, someone came with the information to Kingsley that his wife had given birth to a baby boy. He was happy he didn't kill his wife. It was never his intention to kill Femi either. He was willing to live 10 years of his life. If only I knew, Kingsley said, shaking his head and looking out through the open hole in the prison room.